Geometry in My Eyes by Cameron Anderson, Logan Carolino, Riley Drew, and Frida Kiki. The presentation will begin in 5 seconds. Points can be found around us in many ways, and some examples are a table in the cafeteria, a dot on the eye in drink, and the sun in the sky. Go to the next slide. There are examples of lines around us, and one example is a rail going down the stairs. It seems to be a line because you cannot see the ends of it. Go to the next slide. Planes are two-dimensional surfaces that extend infinitely. Some examples are the sky and ceiling panels. Go to the next slide. Line segments are lines with endpoints. An example of a line segment is a long light. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Rays have one endpoint and extend infinitely in one direction. A similar real-world example would be clock hands. Go to the next slide. Coplanar points are points on a plane, but they do not have to be on the same line. An example is thumbtacks on the board. Go to the next slide. Linear points are points that can be found on the same line. An example is the bolts on the rivets, the lines, on the cistern. Go to the next slide. Opposite rays are rays that extend from a similar point or points that go in different directions. Some examples that we found were the blades on a ceiling fan. Go to the next slide. Perpendicular lines are two lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle. An example is window bars. Go to the next slide. Parallel lines are lines that do not intersect on a 2D plane. Some examples are an iPad case, flagpoles, and brick structures. Go to the next slide. Midpoint segment is the line segment used to find a particular midpoint. One example is orange slices in a painting. Go to the next slide. Linear pairs are two angles that equal 180 degrees. Some examples are sides of a pole and string on a slider. Go to the next slide. Vertical angles are a pair of non-adjacent angles that form when two lines intersect. One example of adjacent angles is the X on a OPX magnet. Go to the next slide. Adjacent angles are two angles that have a common vertex and a same side. One example is string on a slider. Go to the next slide. Complementary angles are two angles that equal 90 degrees. An example is the gaps in between the computer charger's rubber slits. Go to the next slide. Angle bisectors are lines bisecting an angle through the middle. An example is a flower on a painting. Go to the next slide. Perpendicular bisectors are lines that intersect another line in the middle, splitting it in half. Some examples are charging hole on an outlet and spacer between books. Go to the next slide. The executive producer was Riley Drew, the cameraman and technology expert was Cameron Anderson, the scriptwriter was Frida Kiki, and the narrator and cast was Logan Carolino. That's it for this presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.